everyone, Maya here from MaiStoryBook, and welcome back to this week's interactive read aloud. Today's featured read aloud is going to help us think about Pride Month, which we celebrate this June. And Pride Month is a month where we take extra time to celebrate all the different forms of love and identity out there, and to recognize all of the hard work and efforts that a lot of people had to go through to get these rights to be able to love and be who they are. I know in these interactive read alouds, my friends, we talk a lot about things that are fair, what is fair, what is not fair, and how everyone deserves to be treated equally, to have the same rights, to be able to do the same things as others. Protesting is when you speak up for something that you believe in, or you go outside and you march and you hold signs, and then as a big group together, you share your beliefs and you fight for what you believe is right. In this country, Black people have not been treated fairly and equally, and so people are upset and are protesting to fight for that equality. Sometimes you can use just your words and people will listen, my friends, but sometimes, even when you do that, people don't listen. People who have power still don't listen. And when that happens, you do have to take other actions to make sure that your voice is heard in other ways. Well, in today's book, Stonewall, A Building, an Uprising, a Revolution, we're going to learn about a group of people who also had to use their voice in other actions, and we'll talk about what those actions were, to make sure that their voices were heard and that they also got equal rights. We are going to be reading about the LGBTQ community, which stands for lesbian, bi, gay, transgender, and queer community. So these are a group of people who include women who love women and men who love men, and then other people who may have been born a boy but identify as a girl, or born as a girl but identify as a boy, or other people who don't identify as boy or girls. So people have different ways of identifying themselves, of who they feel like they are on the inside and who they love. And how they feel on the inside and who they love and who they want to be is completely up to them, my friends. It is your choice. But some people thought that they shouldn't have that choice. So this uprising, this protest that we are going to be reading about happened June 28th in 1969. So about 40 years ago. And because of that day, that was a very important day to getting the LGBTQ community their equal rights that they have today. And today though, my friends, I still want you to be aware that in some places, they still don't recognize those rights. It's still a fight for people to be able to be treated equally. But this was a starting point that really helped launch more people to fight for those rights as well. Are you ready? Let's begin. The title of today's interactive featured read aloud is Stonewall, A Building, an Uprising, a Revolution. So my friends, the word revolution means a big change, changing a whole system, changing the rules, making something better. And an uprising is when you protest, when you go outside and you use your voice to speak up for what you believe in. And there's a whole bunch of other people too who believe the same things and want the same change. Well, this book was written by Rob Sanders, he's the author, and it was illustrated by Jamie Kristoff. So Jamie Kristoff drew all the pictures, and Rob Sanders wrote all of the words. And taking a look at this cover here, my friends, what do you notice going on? I notice, well, it's daytime or nighttime? Nighttime, so whatever's going on happened during the night. There's this big sign here, and this is what says Stonewall. So Stonewall was actually a building. It was an inn. So an inn is a place where people go to stay, kind of like a hotel. And Stonewall was an inn, and there's also a little restaurant that was a part of it. So it's this building. There's actually two little buildings, so inn, and part of it was a restaurant. And people from the LGBTQ community would come here. Now, I'm also looking down here at the folks down here, and what do you notice about the people? Yeah, a lot of them have their fists raised, and I know that when people raise their fists, they're usually chanting or they're shouting for something, right? And I'm also noticing, my friends, the skin color of these people, and I'm noticing there's lots of people of color with darker skin or different color skin. And it's important to note that the people who started this uprising and who helped fight for these rights for our LGBTQ communities were a lot of people of color. They helped lead this movement and get these rights for people. All right, well, as we read this book is going to be from the point of view of the inn, of the building. So actually, it's going to be the building telling us the story of what happened. It's kind of an interesting perspective, right? A point of view, who is telling the story. Usually it's from a person or sometimes an animal, but in this case, the building is going to be telling us what they see happening around it, because this building is where this uprising took place. Okay, let's get started. So here's our title page, Stonewall, A Building, an Uprising, a Revolution, written by Rob Sanders and illustrated by Jamie Kristoff. And down here it has the publisher, Random House. They are the ones who helped make this book and share it with all of us. All right. Two stable houses side by side, so right next to each other. For more than 100 years, we witnessed history. Then came a night when we became part of history. So these buildings were there, they saw all these things happening, and then they are going to be involved in history now. We were built in the 1840s to board the horses of the affluent in New York City's Greenwich Village. So affluent means the rich. These buildings were made to house the horses of the rich people in New York City, way back then in the 1840s. Inside our brick walls, horses whinnied and hammers clanged, and outside passerbys bustled as carriages rumbled on the cobblestone streets. So way back then, my friends, instead of cars, what did they use to get around? Horses, carriages, they call these carriages. So instead of cars, they had these carriages that they rode in. And then you'll see the streets, they're not the black streets that we see today, like the black pavement. Instead, these are cobblestones, little stones on the streets. So way back then, it looked a lot different, huh? Well, as time passed by, the wealthy residents began to move uptown, taking their art clubs, libraries, fine hotels, and theaters with them. So all the rich people who used to live where this stable was are now moving uptown, taking all the fancy things like art clubs and libraries with them. So instead, our neighborhood became a mecca for immigrants arriving from all over the world. So now people who are coming from different countries are moving to this place where the stables are, in Greenwich Village. Visitors made their way to Greenwich Village and many of them stayed. So now looking at how these immigrants are dressed, my friends, do they look rich or maybe poorer? They don't look as fancy as rich people, right? So now these new immigrants who are moving in aren't as affluent, aren't as rich as the people who used to live there. So the rich people moved out and then these immigrants are moving in, people from all over the world who are coming to America. Well, Greenwich Village was changing, and we changed too, so the buildings changed too. The smell of freshly baked bread began to waft out our windows and into the neighborhood. Fresh bread, my friends. Have you smelled that before? Some of you might have even been making bread if you're at home right now. The roar of automobiles replaced the rumble of carriages as artists and writers moved in. So, what is this, my friends? What does this look like? A car, an automobile. Can you say automobile? That's another word for car. And so instead of carriages, now there's automobiles. So that tells me that time is moving forward, right? Now they're making new inventions. Contemporary art galleries, experimental theaters, and small restaurants sprang up around us. The village was becoming the creative center of New York City. Wow, my friends. So now this is a place where artists and writers and all these creative people want to come and be. Immigrants bring so many different talents to our country. By 1930, our two buildings were joined together. So these two stables that were separate are now together. And we became Bonnie's Stonewall Restaurant. Celebrities, artisans, tourists, and local residents lunched at our tables shoulder to shoulder. So a whole bunch of people came to this Stonewall restaurant, all kinds of people. Greenwich Village was a place where you could be yourself and where being different was welcome and accepted. And my friends, that sounds like a place where I would want to be, where you could be exactly who you are and whoever you were was accepted and welcomed. And let's take a look at this picture here because it's showing us all the different kinds of people who came to Greenwich Village and they're eating shoulder to shoulder. What do you notice about some of these people? Could be anything. Yeah. You might notice how they're dressed, like this one looks really fancy, right? You can dress in all different sorts of ways. There's people of all different races and ethnicities, right? All different skin colors, all eating together. Ooh. Newness thumped in the heart of Greenwich Village in the 1950s, vibrating our windows, shaking our windows. Musicians played on the streets and jazz filled the air. My friends, have you heard jazz music before? African Americans were a large part of bringing jazz music to the United States. And it's a very wonderful music sound. You should definitely listen to it. It's got a lot of saxophone in there, and saxophone is this instrument that makes a beautiful, clear, loud noise. If you haven't heard jazz before, my friends, I recommend you go and take a listen after this book. So, jazz filled the air, poets performed in restaurants, and ooh, what's going on here? Artists painted in studios. The beat movement arrived and we witnessed it all. So there's this movement where all of these different artists were coming and creating music, poetry, art, paintings, drawings. What an amazing time to be around, huh, my friends? My friends, do you like to do any of these creative activities? Play music, write poetry, stories, paint, art? Which ones do you like to do? Yeah. I like playing music and painting and drawing, a little writing too, all of them. Well, leading up to the 1960s, our neighborhood welcomed gays and lesbians. So gays and lesbians are men who loved men, gays, and women who loved women, lesbians. We were a home for people who were told that they didn't fit in or belong. So back then, people didn't think that men should love men or women should love women. They thought only men and women should be together. But, as we've talked about, my friends, people can love whomever they want. Love is love, and if you love someone, then that should be a beautiful and happy thing for you. Still today, as we mentioned, there are some people who still believe that gays and lesbians shouldn't be able to love who they want. But back in the 1960s, even more people thought that. But it sounds like in this place, Greenwich Village, that they accepted everyone for being exactly who they are and for loving whomever they wanted. We had welcomed all kinds of people before, so we knew what to do. So these buildings welcomed all sorts of people, right? So they knew what to do. In 1967, we swung open our doors and became the Stonewall Inn. So now they are a place where people can stay, like a hotel. Gay men and women from throughout the city and the country came to meet old and new friends, free to be themselves inside our walls. So what a special place. During this time when they felt like they had nowhere else to go because people didn't accept them, Stonewall Inn was a place they could go and be themselves, be accepted, feel welcomed. My friends, I'm hoping that you and me can be like the Stonewall Inn, and that when people come to us who are maybe different than ourselves, we are going to be welcoming and accepting of who they are. Women and men, young and old, teenagers, transgender people, so people who believe that they should be different genders. So maybe they were born a boy but are a girl really on the inside, or maybe they're a girl and they should really be a boy. Drag queens, veterans, business people, students, people of different colors, religions and cultures gathered, chatted, laughed, and danced under our roofs. So, my friends, no matter who they were, Stonewall Inn welcomed everybody. And just taking a quick look again, what do you notice about some of these people here? All different sorts of people. Yes. But then I'm looking at this picture, my friends, and what do you notice going on here? That looks like the police over there in the corner, and what are they doing? Who is in their police car? Others were not as accepting. They thought those who gathered within our walls were too different. My friends, can you be too different? I don't think so. I don't think you can ever be too different. That's like saying you're too much different. If you're a really, truly accepting person who is kind and loved others, then you would accept people for just who they are. No one could be too different for you. We heard the whispered voices of those inside. So these people were whispering, loving someone like yourself is illegal. Socializing together could get you arrested. Wearing the wrong clothes could land you in jail. Being gay could get you fired or kicked out of your home. So just because of who you love or how you dress or what you look like or who you believe you are, you could go to jail, you could be kicked out, you could be fired. It was illegal. Does that sound fair to you, my friends? It does not. And when things like that are that unfair, people want to speak up and demand fairness for themselves and others. Some nights we heard fists pounding on our doors, felt angry footsteps stomping across our floor, and saw flashes of glaring light as the police arrested some of those inside. So sometimes the police come inside and arrest them, but were they doing anything wrong, my friends? What were they doing inside? Just dancing and having a good time with each other? Why would the police arrest people for not doing anything wrong? Sounds like these police weren't accepting of people who were different from them. Well, after each raid, those who hadn't been arrested left quietly, angrily, disappearing into the darkness. But we stood tall and kept opening our doors, and people kept coming. So a raid is when police just come in. Nobody knows they're coming, but they just burst in, and then they start arresting some people. And after they do that, how do people feel? Scared, right? And angry, and they'd leave, but Stonewall Inn just kept opening its doors, saying everyone's still welcome here. So people kept coming, but the police raids kept coming too. They kept coming in. We couldn't stop them. In the steaming early morning hours of June 28th, 1969, so remember that date? That's the date of the Stonewall Uprising. Under a nearly full moon, another raid began. It's another raid, another time when police are coming in, barging in. No one knows that they're coming. They weren't invited, but they're going to come in and stop whatever's going on inside. But as we know, nothing wrong is going on inside, so it doesn't seem fair what they're doing, does it? Police! A voice shouted, "We're taking the place!" Officers stormed through our doors, lining up the people inside, demanding IDs, detaining people, and arresting others. So detaining means taking them, capturing them, holding them, not letting them leave. This time, though, those not arrested didn't disappear into the night. Instead, they stood defiantly in the street and on the sidewalk under our rusty sign. So defiantly means I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to back down. Even though you're telling me to leave, I am going to stay. How do you think they're feeling right now? Angry, right? Angry that the police are raiding and hurting and harming their friends when they weren't doing anything. They were just celebrating and loving and being who they were. This time, they weren't quiet. They're not just going to leave quietly. As the ones arrested were led to the police cars and patrol wagons, the anger of the growing crowd was lit. "Why don't you do something?" yelled one woman as she was forced into a police car. My friends, and if that was you, if you weren't doing anything wrong and you were just being yourself, and the police came and tried to arrest you for being you, how would you feel? Angry and upset. And if they arrested my friends, then I would want to do something about it. Immediately, that spark of anger grew into a smoldering resistance. So their anger is getting bigger and resisting. They want to fight back against the police and what is happening. Shouts and screams echoed off the bricks. Fists thrust into the air. We saw the faces of the crowd and we felt their rage. We felt their anger. So here's all the people in front of Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall Uprising had begun. They're so angry that this has been happening again and again. They are ready to do something to stop it because it's not fair. And unless they do something, they're going to keep happening. The police, shocked by the defiance of the crowd, so the police aren't used to people not listening to them, rushed back inside the Stonewall Inn and barricaded themselves inside. So they're inside the Stonewall Inn and they're trying to block the doors so the people who are outside can't get into them. Our friends stood outside trying to force open the doors. Our windows were shattered, they were broken, smoke drifted through our rooms. We stood firm. Years of silent anger inflamed the crowd. So for years they were told that they were wrong, that what they were doing was wrong, and they are very upset. The police called for help and it soon arrived. The fires were extinguished, were put out, and the police came back outside. But the crowd's anger was not extinguished. They were still upset. Their rights and their freedoms were still not respected, and they were angry about that. I would be too. "Gay power," the protesters shouted. "We want freedom." The police had never seen anything like it before. Neither had we, and it wasn't over. The Stonewall Uprising continued on and off for several days and nights. A new day was dawning for the gay rights movement. The change had begun here, inside our walls, at the Stonewall Inn. And the gay rights movement is now known as the LGBTQ rights movement. So it includes all the other groups too, the lesbians, bisexual, transgender, queer. So my friends, it didn't just take one day for the people to fight back against the police and against people who were treating them unfairly. It took several days and nights for them to keep protesting and sharing their voice, demanding what was right. Until people start to listen and until there's change, you have to keep fighting for what you believe in and for what is right. Well, a year later, on June 28, 1970, our windows looked out on men and women gathering to celebrate the first anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. So that Stonewall Uprising was a very important part of starting the LGBTQ rights movement. So because of that time, people now began to speak out for their rights and for equality. And a year later, people celebrated that time because that was the time where they stood up for themselves, where people stood up for each other and fought for what was right and fair. See here, there are some signs. They say gay is good, gay pride. Remember back then it was called the gay rights movement. At first, hundreds marched, so that's a lot of people. But then thousands of women and men, young and old, teenagers, transgender people, drag queens, veterans, business people, students, people of different colors, religions, and cultures, and their friends and their families joined to parade through the streets of New York City. Say it clear, say it loud, gay is good, gay is proud, they chanted. So they called out. So my friends, even people who were not gay, lesbian, or part of the LGBTQ community joined in to celebrate their rights and to fight for their rights and to share their voices in support. Because when there's a group of people who aren't being treated fairly, my friends, it isn't only up to them to fight for their rights. It's the responsibility of everyone to help out and make sure that everyone is treated equally. Even if you aren't the one who's being harmed, does that mean that you just stand by and let it happen? No, right? If you see something wrong, you use your voice and you speak up too, and you help those who are being wronged. So look at all of these big thousands of people who came out and stood with this community to help them out and get them their rights and freedoms too, and support them. Many things are different now, and some things have changed. Even some laws have changed. Now, two men who love each other or two women who love each other can marry. We know. We've seen their happy faces snapping photos outside our door. We've heard their footsteps walking side by side along our floors. We felt their love. Each year in June, people all over the world celebrate the movement for the LGBTQ rights. A movement that has come so far, a movement that still has further to go. So the movement isn't over yet, and still in some places, my friends, people are not treated fairly for being LGBTQ. They celebrate inside and outside our walls, and they celebrate freedom. They celebrate equality. It all began one night here at the Stonewall Inn, when two old horse stables became part of history. Where these two buildings became a part of history. And over here, I see this flag, and what do you notice about this flag? It's a rainbow flag, right? And this is actually a symbol for the LGBTQ movement, a rainbow flag. And we'll actually be reading later this month about how this rainbow flag came to be the symbol and the important people behind it. The end, my friends. Well, so remember, this is based on a true story. This is a true story that actually happened in history. And so here's the actual picture of the real Stonewall Inn. And there's a little note if you want to read more about the history. You can pause the video here and zoom in if you'd like to read it. And here, my friends, are some actual pictures, some real photographs of people in the Stonewall Inn. And this is actually a group of young people right outside after the uprising on that first night. And some other photos of them celebrating in their movements and their marches. This book has also other resources, an interview with someone who participated in the Stonewall Uprising, and some websites if you want to go to learn more, and also some vocabulary words. All right, my friends. Well, this was a very important story to share, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it and learning from it. What was something you learned or one part of the story that you liked? Yeah, well, it's inspiring to see people stand up for what they believe in, right? And it's inspiring to know that they can create change. If you all come together and use your voices and fight and protest for what is right, you can create change. After this uprising started, things did change, like it said in the book. New laws were passed to create change, and people's beliefs also did change. More people became accepting. Of course, people should be accepting in the first place, right? No matter what, you shouldn't have to persuade or convince someone that you deserve equal rights, but Unfortunately, that's the way it is in our society, and we are trying to change that though, and I hope that you will use your voice too to stand up and fight for what you believe is right also. Help protect the rights and freedoms of everybody. Well, my friends, if you're interested to learn more, there's plenty of resources online in this book too. If you want to check out this book for yourself, there's resources in the back to learn more. And I hope that it inspired you to use your voice and take a stand as well. I'm glad you joined me on this interactive read aloud, my friends. And this is a great story for you to also start having a conversation with your family too, your parents. It's a great way to start talking about what is going on. If you have any questions for them, ask them and have that conversation with them. I'm sure they'd love to talk to you and tell you about it. All right. Also, if you do have any other questions, you can also reach out to me, MaiStoryBook, by reaching out to me on Instagram, Facebook, social media, on the blog, email me. All the social media links can be found below. If you're looking for other reading recommendations, my friends, then go ahead and also check out the blog or my social media for other books too. It helps us recognize and value all people of all different cultures and colors. Also, my friends, be sure to subscribe to MaiStoryBook YouTube channel to keep up with all of our interactive read aloud. MaiStoryBook has a new interactive read aloud coming out every week, either on Wednesdays or Fridays, so be able to check out those days. Also, since this is Pride Month, this month of June, I will be doing a book a day series of some other Pride Month books that we can read together to celebrate all the different forms of love and identities that are out there. All right, so until next time, my friends, happy reading.